VR dev for non-coders. Today we are going to make our first VR mini game for HTC Vive. My name is Marco Lawrence from Pengu Studios and I am super excited, so let's get cracking. So here we are in Unity. Let's make a new project. Let's call it Cuber 3, The Wild Hunt. It's about a lone warrior that hunts evil cubes disguised as normal cubes before they can destroy the world. Original idea, I'm sure. Great. So anyways, let's choose a location. Let's go to a folder and we'll call it Cuber 3. Great. And we'll check that it's 3D. And then we'll create a project. And here we are in Unity. Let's just make sure again that we have the same layout. Choose default. So we have the same starting point. So now if you look at our project, all our work is gone. We don't have Steam VR. We don't have PlayMaker. So I am going to go ahead and import all that goodness into this project. So I will see you on the other side. Okay, to start our development for reals with VR, we need one more thing. So let's search for Steam VR PlayMaker. And we have this asset called Steam VR Tools for PlayMaker. There's another one called Steam VR PlayMaker Toolkit. I haven't tried that myself. I'm sure it's good, but so far I've been using this one from Dithernet. Again, I'm murdering that name, I'm sure, but we'll go anyway. So import this into a project after you bought it. It's 15 euros. That means that we have to continue our abstinence from cheeseburgers for another 2 weeks. I'm sure you will be okay. So import that into your project. The usual tricks. Now, once it has imported, if we go to the console, let's actually organize this a little bit to my liking. So we whack that there, and then I'll make these icons a little smaller. So we have lots of big red errors here. So why is that? That's because in Steam VR PlayMaker folder, we have this vectrosity folder. So this asset has some custom actions for vectrosity. And because that is missing, it gives us all those errors. We don't have this, or we don't use it for this tutorial, so we can, with no problems, remove this folder. Delete. And then most of the errors disappear. Let's click clear. That went, and we can just hope for the best from now on, that it wasn't something disastrous. So now we have all the assets we need, so let's start developing. So let's make a scene. We'll start by creating a plane. We'll check that it's in 0, 0, 0. That's great. And then we will grab the camera rig prefab from Steam VR. And that is now there again, 0, 0, 0. That's fantastic. This time, let's make the play area 2 meters by 1.5 meters. I read from somewhere that's the most common play area that players have. So let's go for that today. Okay, so let's make our evil cubes. So game object, 3D object, and cube. So now we have this big, massive cube there in the scene. The transforms are going crazy. So let's click on that cog and reset. There we go. So it's pretty much filling the whole play area. So let's make it a little smaller. So we'll scale it to 0.2 on all axes. So now we have a couple of problems. Everything is white, so it's really hard to see anything. And then we have this big, massive camera gizmo there in the middle where we would want to see something. So we can affect the gizmo here, that drop down menu, and then this slider, and we can make it a little smaller. And then the cube is still white, so let's create a material for it. So let's make a new folder here. So create drop down and new folder. And I like to call this, let's just see. My assets. Now it's in the prefabs folder, so let's grab that and whack it in the assets root folder instead. So inside my assets folder, I can right click here and then create another folder. And we call it materials. And then if we go inside that folder, we can right click and create a material. And we call it evil cube. Nice. So now here in the inspector, we can then make some choices, and I'm interested in the albedo. So let's choose a color, and evil cubes are red, of course. There we go. So here we have a little representation on how this evil color would look like. Let's whack my face back there. So now we are ready to grab this evil cube material and then drag it on top of our evil cube. And now it's nice and red. Now let's raise it up a little bit. Let's write 1 on the position Y. Now that equals 1 meter, which is handy. So now we have our cube there. So let's look at what it has. It has something called the box collider, and that helps it to interact with the world around it. So we can edit the collider and we get these small green dots here, and we can make this collider bigger if we want to for some reason, but we just want it to be exactly the same size as the cube now. Okay, so then another thing that we need in this cube is rigid body. So if you just write rigid here in the search field, the rigid body comes up, and then double click on that, and that gets added to the cube. So now if we would kind of leave it as it is and would press play, let me just grab the game view here and whack it here. All right, so if we press play now, something interesting will happen to the cube. And if you watch it like a hawk, yes, it fell down because gravity affects it. So now rigid body has this handy box here where we can untick, use gravity, and then the box will not be bothered about gravity. Okay, so let's name our cube evil cube. Excellent. And I think we are ready to make it into a prefab. So I presume you sort of know what that is. So let's make a new folder, prefabs. Fantastic. And then let's grab the evil cube, and then we drag it into the prefabs folder. There. And then we take the evil cube in the scene, and then we can delete it by pressing delete. Don't worry, he will be back. Okay, so now we have created our nemesis. So let's start making some game logic with PlayMaker. So let's go to the PlayMaker menu, PlayMaker editor. Let's close this window and let's drag this one here. And there we go. Let's create a new empty game object. Let's check that it's in zeros or reset, and we call it spawn controller. So we're gonna make a FSM in this spawn controller. So right click to add FSM, and we'll have a couple of states. So let's add another state here. So we have, let's call this initialize, perhaps so. And let's call this state spawn. Fantastic. So in this state, we're going to do all the preparatory things for us to be able to randomly spawn enemies inside our play area. So let's go to this state window here. You might be somewhere else. So go to the state and then click on the action browser. That will pop up, and then let's dock the action browser here. Let's get rid of any text that you might have there. And then we are going to create a few random variables, random floats. So float, and let's type random. So if you double click on the random float, it will add it to the initialize state. So I'm going to double click on it here to name it random float X. So what we're going to do is we're going to create random values on the x-axis with this float. And if you remember, this play area was 2 meters by 1.5 meters. So then the value on the x-axis that we want to create is, let's just say, minus 0.9 to plus 0.9. So that will give us a value somewhere between that and that point. Then let's right click here and copy selected actions, and then we right click here and paste actions, and double click on the name, and then we're going to create a float for the Z axis. And this time was 1.5, so let's make it 0.7 minus 0.7, and then maximum 0.7. And then we want to create one more random float on the Y, and let's just see, paste actions. Now this time minimum, let's make it 0.1. So it doesn't go inside the ground, and the maximum, I don't know, 2.2 perhaps. Make it a little bit challenging at least. So now we want to store these random floats. So we have this handy store result, drop down here, new variable. This is so handy, it's amazing. So let's call it X float. And let's call this one Z float, and let's call this one Y float. And you see my name is wrong here, so let's fix that. There we go. So now we have random values for all the axes. So let's combine those as a vector 3 variable. So let's search for vector 3. And here we have set vector 3 x, y, z. So let's double click on that. And let's move it in the bottom, to the bottom of the stack. So now we can then assign the x value as our x float, y value as the y float, and z value as the z float. And we can then store it as a new variable, and we can call it spawn vector 3. A location there in the middle. That would do the trick. Okay, now once all this is done, it can then move into the spawn state. So now let's right click on the initialize, add a transition, and we can now this time use just finished. And then we're gonna left click and drag the finished transition and then drag it on top of the spawn state. And that is good. Okay, so next we wanna then create an evil cube in that random location. So we want to create an object. So let's search for an object and create object. That sounds great. And now we want to grab the evil cube in our prefabs folder and left click and drag it on the game object. And then our spawn point position will be our spawn location vector3 variable. And then let's store that spawned object to a game object variable. Let's make a new here and we'll call it spawned game object. Marvelous. And after that, let's just tell the engine to wait for a random time. So we'll search for wait and we get random wait. That sounds excellent. Let's grab it and whack it at the bottom of the stack. So let's say minimum of 2 seconds and maximum of 4 seconds. And then it's asking for a finish event. So let's provide one. Add a transition, finished, and then left click and drag on it and then drag it back to initialize. And then let's just mark this finish event as finished. Okay, so now we could test our little FSM here to see what's happening. Let's perhaps save the scene. Save scene as, let's create a new folder and I'm naming my things like this for no reason whatsoever. Cuber3. So you can name them whatever you like as long as you can find them. So now let's press play and see what we've done. So we get lots and lots of evil cubes. Now if we would let this run, evil cubes would take over the world. There would be so many of them that resistance would be futile. So we have to do something here. So let's go to our initialize state. And there we want to make a destroy action. So let's look for one of those. Destroy object sounds fantastic. And let's grab that and drag it to the top of the stack. And then it's asking for what object are we going to destroy. And remember, we created that game object variable. And we can choose that. And now it's going to destroy that particular game object that is inside the spawned game object variable. So now, if we press play, we have our evil cubes spawning and being destroyed one by one. And now is a good time to go and test this amazing prototype. Walk around and see how these evil cubes spawn all around you. It's going to be scary. We're not finished yet, but it's good to give it a little peek. So go look at it, and I'll see you on the other side. Madness. They're everywhere. I'm surrounded. What am I to do? So that was the first part part for making a mini game for HTC Vive with PlayMaker and Unity. I'm gonna take a little rest now. My brain is totally frazzled, and then I will start making the part 2. So that will turn up very soon on YouTube. So see you there. Bye.